So I could not be more excited to be doing this. They were like, "Are you available for American fiction?" I was like, "Yes." I will do anything. So I am so excited to be here, and I know that we're going to have lots of fun. And I feel like there's so many questions and so many things that I want to kind of just get right into it so that we can cover all the ground we can. So, of course, I'm going to start with you, Cord, because you're next to me and I get to bother you whenever I want to now. In these things, obviously, it always starts with the story. So can we just, tell me, what was it about the story in the book that really made you want to write this feature?
Yeah. So this starts, before I worked in film and television, I was a journalist for about 8 or 9 years. And toward the end of my journalism career, in 2014, I published this article called The Racism Beat. And it was how I had reached this point in my career when it felt like on a weekly basis somebody was coming to me and saying, do you want to write about Trayvon Martin being killed? Do you want to write about Mike Brown being killed? Do you want to write about X unarmed black person being killed by somebody? Do you want to write about this racist thing that somebody said about Barack Obama? And it felt like, I'd reached this point in my career where it was like, it was just a revolving door of misery was my job. It was sort of that's sort of like what people thought I was good for. And that's sort of like spiritually degrading, right? To sort of like just be confronting that constantly. But then also it felt like, what can I write about this that I didn't write the last time this happened, right? Like, what can I write about this that I didn't write 2 times ago when this happened? What can I write about this that somebody didn't write when this happened to Amadou Diallo, right? Like, what can I write about this that hasn't been written for centuries? And so it just felt like I had sort of reached a wall with what I felt like I was doing with my journalism career. I didn't feel inspired anymore. So when I started working in film and TV, it was like, great, this is the world of fiction, fantasy. We're not beholden to anything. We can just sort of like write about anybody doing anything. We can put black people anywhere we want to put them. And it wasn't long before people were coming to me and saying, do you want to write this movie about a black teenager being killed by the police? Do you want to write this movie about slaves? Do you want to write this movie about drug dealers? Do you want to write this movie about gang members in Chicago? And it felt like, even here, even in the world of fiction and fantasy, when we can do anything we want to, there's still this incredibly limited perspective as what black life looks like, and there's this incredibly limited perspective as to what artists of color can do and sort of like what we are good at. And so I'd been talking about this since I was a journalist for literally decades with my colleagues and my family and my friends. And so when I found this book, I was just looking for a new book to read in December of 2020 over the holiday break. And I was reading this book review for a different novel called Interior Chinatown. And in that book review, it said that there's a satire reminiscent of Percival Everett's Erasure, and I'd never heard of Erasure. And I read a synopsis, and it sounded interesting. I just bought it with no intention of adapting, not looking for anything. I was just going to read something over Christmas. And within 50 pages, I felt like, this is speaking to me. I think that I might want to adapt this into a screenplay. And then about 100 pages in, I was like, I think that I might want to direct this, because I realized that any screenplay I would write would feel so deeply personal to me that to then give it away to somebody would feel like giving away a limb. And so, that was the sort of, that was the genesis of all this. At a certain point, I also started reading the book in Jeffrey Wright's voice. That's like how early I was into it.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
Yeah, and so it was like essentially I wrote this for Jeffrey. I just sort of he really came to mind like halfway through the book, and I just pictured him. And by the time that I was done with it, it felt like somebody had written me a novel. I felt like it was one of those things where I was like, when I was done with it, I was bouncing. It was frustrating because it was one of those things where, when you're just like, I want to get started now. I want to get started immediately. And it was frustrating because it was the holidays. And so I couldn't just reach out. Like all the agencies were closed. And it was just kind of like, I was just bouncing off the walls in my house for like a week straight, waiting to talk to somebody about it so I could talk to Percival to get the rights. That's how, I don't know, it inspired me in a way that nothing has before or since, really.
That's amazing. Although obviously the voice is Jeffrey going, "What if?" It was just handed to it. I think that's amazing. We do have some clips that we're gonna be showing as well. It's gonna kind of go over us. We're going to have to all kind of look behind us if you want to see what it is. But I just want to let the booth know that we're about to go into the first one, which is the opening, because I want to talk about the fact that the movie starts with such an amazing scene, an amazing opening where it just tells you so much about what the ride is going to be that you're going to be on. So I'm hoping that they'll be able to cue it up so we can talk a little bit about how you plan that for that. I think if ever there was an introduction to somebody who you immediately go, oh, he's got rage. You know, that is like the most beautiful opening of a movie that I've seen in such a long time. So, tell me your thoughts about setting that up and choosing to start with an introduction of a character in that way.
Of course, it was about introducing Monk and introducing, you learn so much about him in such a sort of like economical scene, right? It's sort of like you see that he's somebody who thinks differently about these things. You see that he's interested in literature, he's interested in ideas, he's not interested in the sort of emotions around things, right? He's not sort of like being guided by emotions, he's being guided by his rationality and his intellect. And you see that sort of like he's out of step with the modern world in a little bit, right? He's sort of like he sees he's I think out of step with the modern world is the best way of putting it. So I repeat myself. I'm sorry, but it's also about introducing the film and sort of what the film is going to be about. That's such a scary word for so many people. It's so terrifying to sort of like for people to even think about it, and let alone put it like 30 feet wide on a movie screen, right? And sort of, it's about letting people know that you're allowed to laugh. That's sort of like that this is, you're supposed to laugh, and that this is, I think that was one of the things when we first started testing the movie, it was like people were like nervous, like, am I allowed to be laughing at this? And so we wanted to start with a sort of like drop an atomic bomb in the first scene and say like, look, you need to get over it. This is sort of like movie is going to address these kinds of third rail issues that you're afraid of, but we're all going to get through this together, and it's okay. It's like okay to cringe a little bit. It's okay to laugh. I just wanted to, of course, establish Monk, but also just establish the tone of the movie and let people know like this is the ride that you're in for, and like I know that this seems scary, but I promise you're going to get over it, and we're all going to go through this together.
I mean, it's amazing that it kind of takes the fear and the preciousness out of it all. It's like it's just going to lay it bare, and we're just in for it. Like we're kind of in the mud now. That's just all.
I just think that is, it's. I wanted to just sort of like get it at the very outset, let people know that like I know that these are things that we're not supposed to talk about in polite company, but like we're going to, and so buckle up.
Gotta love it. So, Jeffrey, when you hear that he has manifested your voice while writing this, and that you are the person that he thought of this entire time, can you tell me about the first time you met Cord as a first-time director, and sitting there kind of assessing? Do you think he can deliver what he's got?
Well, I guess my first thought when Cord sent me the script and along with a letter attached via email through the usual suspects, my agents, my first thought that I was a little disappointed that I wasn't going to see the movie about Barack Obama's mother forging his birth certificate. I got over that, and then I said, okay, I'll read this letter. And well, the first introduction was the letter, but was that scene. That's the first scene that I read. And I said, I know that guy. And also, I know that conversation. And it's a conversation that is being had in classrooms all over this country. And it's a conversation that's being had at times as well as that conversation was had. But there was a fluency to Cord's control of the scene that I really appreciated. And I was really excited from that first scene to dive in further, but to play that moment. So I guess after that, I read the script, read his letter as well, which said, that as he just described, he felt a lot of overlap with this book on reading it, and that he was really excited about it, and that he, thought of me very early in the process, and that he had no plan B. So that was compelling. That was flattering. The, he then describes a little bit later, like early in this process of promoting the film, that it took me a while to get back to him. The reason being was that I was kind of living a very close approximation to a monk-like reality in terms of what was happening in my family, and just generally having the walls of life close in following a series of events inside my family. So it took me a while to read it, and when I did get into it, I just felt like Cord, these tremendous overlaps with him personally, as well as a curiosity about the issues that were being raised, because these issues are at the forefront of the political of the national discourse, the political discourse right now, the social discourse right now, and it just seemed like the right time to play this stuff. So that was the first meeting with him, was really through his script. And further, that was my first understanding of what he could possibly be as a director, because directing is really, for me, just two things: communication and leadership. That's it. Visual stuff, yeah, there's obviously, but it's about having a vision, a clear vision, communicating that, not only through the aperture and onto the screen, but first and foremost on set. So clearly a great communicator. And then as I got to learn more about the process that he was going through, he's also a very good leader, clearly a strong leader, because he drove that vision through that script and ultimately into the hands of people who said, okay, we're actually going to do this. That wasn't easy. That takes tenacity. I found out later when we got on set that not only is he a wonderful leader and galvanizes people, but he did it with a great sense of humor and a great sense of humility, that he never pretended to know what he didn't know. And that's, a lot of people do that. But he's one of the sharper cookies in the jar. Smart guy. And we just followed his lead and, threw a couple lead blocks for him, pulling guard here and there. But it was a wonderful journey. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had working on a film. It was largely owing to Cord.
That's amazing. It's funny because my next question was, what did he do, or how was he that gave you the confidence in him? And you answered it so brilliantly on your own. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit, because we have so many people here who are filmmakers who maybe don't know what they should bring to the table when they're going to talk to an actor and try to convince them. Is there anything that he could have said or done that would have just absolutely turned you off?
Yeah, sure. But I think, again, going back to the script is a very clear blueprint, one for the film, but it's a clear blueprint on who this guy is. So, everything that he said was reflected there, and everything that he said was within the context of that. And as he described, too, a very personal story. Likewise for Percival. Percival, in a talk with Cord a couple of weeks ago, said, I don't write autobiographical pieces, but there's a lot of me invested in there. Cord expresses the same. When I read it, it's like, in fortunate and unfortunate ways, I'm that guy. Yeah. So we were like, three variations on a theme. So you could have said something, but everything was said within that context. So it was all clear to me.
I love that, seemingly he let his writing shine through for talent, but also his letter gave you a personal idea of what kind of person he is, how he communicates. And I think that people can be too quick to write something trivial or not getting to the heart of who they are and why.
Well, the working title of the script was at the time fuck too. So that perked my ears up. So yeah, there was a nice little recipe that he threw together there.
That's not going to work
grab-
every time.
to grab the attention.
So, you've had this amazing conversation with Jeffrey, and now you're kind of ready to go, and you obviously are kind of thinking of your department heads now. So I want to kind of ask, when you met with Christina, how did you get to know of her and her talent?
My assistant and good friend Hannah Offer, who's somewhere out there, we were going to. Hannah helped me so much in the initial stages of this film, and when it was getting on its feet and we were finally looking for department heads, I wasn't supposed to meet Christina. Hannah was just like, "You should meet my friend Christina Dunlap. She's great." And so I was like, "Okay, well, let's do it." I don't know where to go, so yeah, sure. They were sort of T Street. The producers were lining up all these cinematographer meetings, and Christina wasn't on their radar, but Christina was the first person I met, and we went to. I think that. I don't like to toot my own horn a lot, but I will toot my own horn and say that I think I'm a good judge of character. I really do. I think that is a quality that I have. And I sat down with Christina at a sort of cafe in Echo Park, and we just started chatting. And within like 6 minutes, I was like, okay, I want to hire Christina to be the cinematographer. I just knew it. I just knew it. And she had a lot of really good ideas. I liked her energy, and so. I left the meeting and I called the producers and I was like, "Yep, we're done. I want to hire Christina." And they were like, "You can't do that." And I was like, "It doesn't. Why? I like her. She's good. She understands what we're doing. I want to hire Christina." And they were like, "No, you can't hire the first person that you meet. You need to meet several other people." So I went and met several other people, and they were all wonderful, really, really great people, really great at their jobs. But I didn't vibe with anybody the way that I vibed with Christina, and so. Yeah, she was the first, and the thing that I told everybody from Jeffrey on down is that the thing that I really liked about Christina and everybody here to my left, everybody who worked on the movie, as I said, listen, I know it's hard to be a cinematographer. I know it's a hard job. I know this is especially a hard job on an independent film without a lot of money. We don't have a lot of time. I understand that sort of augments the difficulty. And so I said, also the thing that you need to know is that this is the first time I've done this, and I don't know what I don't know. And so there's going to be times when you say things and I don't understand what you're talking about. I said, I'm smart and I'm a quick learner, but there's going to be times when you have to be a substitute teacher. And so if you don't want to be a cinematographer and occasionally a substitute teacher, I don't begrudge you walking away from this. I have no problem with you saying you don't want to do that, because I understand you have a hard job already. And if you don't want to do that, then you don't have to do that. And so everybody to my left and everybody who ended up working on the film understood that. And that, to me, made me feel so comfortable on set, because I never had to go in. I never went in thumping my chest and dictatorially and screaming and yelling, because I think that people do that out of insecurity. I think that sort of like people are afraid. And so the way that they sort of like deal with their insecurity is getting loud and angry. And I never did that. I just went on to set and I felt incredibly protected by all of these people. Everybody who worked on the film I felt incredibly protected by. And Christina was one of the first HODs that I gave that speech to. And I just, I felt, now that we've done the movie and she was great, I let the producers know, you see, I was right all along.
Okay, Christina, that was your chance to go, like, he was terrible. I'm curious, though, because you are working with somebody who's brand new to, feature filmmaking. How did you kind of bring him along so that you guys had the same vocabulary? How did you build a way of understanding each other?
Well, first of all, I get to say thank you to Hannah every day in my head, but I don't get to say it publicly, so thank you, Hannah, and Court, of course, but... the second I sat down with Court, it was very clear that it was in his mind. He wrote it. It was there. It's just the the right vocabulary that was missing. And so it was about finding that together. So we watched a lot of movies and looked at a lot of references. And there's something called Shot Deck that has frames from tons of movies. So I would pull up frames and say, this is what a wide angle lens close up feels like versus a long lens close up. And when we were sort of breaking down who Monk was and what his character was like, you know, we wanted him to feel isolated. And so we wanted to open the movie on a really long lens where all you saw was Monk and the rest of the world was just a blur. It didn't matter because he's such an isolated character and he sort of pushes people away, and we wanted to visually open on that note. And then the camera kind of whips over as someone comes to infiltrate his space and his sanity, and that continues to happen throughout the movie. So that was sort of a visual motif that we set up in this first scene. And I don't know, character introductions are really big for me. I think Apocalypse Now, it's like every time you meet somebody, you know who they are in the first few frames. And so we tried to do that again with like the introduction of Sterling, where we're kind of floating down the beach and then we stop on him and he's like smug and crying at the same time. And he just has this like presence that's incredible that he holds throughout the film. So there was all those sort of, and the first time you see Erica at the car, you know, we tried to do that and build these character arcs visually at first and then go scene by scene. So, you know, Cora's very, very such a humble person, but you know, there's certain words that you teach in vocabulary, but he knew exactly what he wanted, and you know, he felt the movie so deeply, and that was very clear from the beginning. So I was never afraid that it was going to get lost, but yeah.
That's fantastic. I'd love for the booth to give us clip number 2, which is the funeral. I think that this talks a lot about what she's saying. I love that scene so much. There's just so much to love there, and it is. I love the kind of sad serenity of it. I love the music, and then just to have exactly how you're saying is we see Monk isolated, you know, off when we've had this really poignant moment, and then just to watch Cliff walk through the frame to terrorize Philip is like the best moment ever, because it was like, you know, to quote Steel Magnolia's, laughter through tears is my favorite emotion. And that was just one of those moments that just takes you and like lets you release. Yeah. So I would love to hear more about how you set that up, because, you know, Monk is out there by himself at the water doing this lovely thing. And in the middle of it all, Cliff just walks through frame cursing. I mean, I just think that's amazing. So I would love to hear how you kind of set it up.
Yeah, I mean, from the very beginning, it was important to Cord that it didn't feel like a traditional comedy. So we wanted to, I mean, there's so much emotion going on in every scene. Like you said, there's always a heartfelt moment and something becomes very sad and then you are forced to laugh through it. So we wanted the camera to reflect that as well. And I think that's why we chose the wider 2:4 aspect ratio, because it was easier to hold more people in frame and sort of see their relationship to each other while being close enough that you could see the emotions in someone's face. So we were never too removed from the situation. You felt more, you know, like a participant in the scene. And so with that, yeah, it was important to us to sort of show the emotion of everybody, introduce Cliff, and then show the chaos that he is going to bring to the family, but also the protection and the love and the heart. And, you know, he really comes in and mixes it up.
I love it. Beautiful chaos was exactly what ensued. Erica, hey sis. So can you talk about how this project kind of came to you, and how was Coraline described to you? Like, what was your impression before you got a chance to read her?
So Jeffrey mentioned that the name of the film was originally Fuck. And so I got a call and was told that there was interest in me in playing a role, Coraline, in this film written by this very talented writer who is very accomplished and had a really very interesting background, and that Jeffrey Wright was the lead and Coraline was his girlfriend. So I really did think this was going to be my 9.5 weeks. And so the way that Jeffrey says his ears perked up, my nips did the same. You hear me? I'm going to tell you the truth. We're all adults. I was in. Luckily, I went through, the process. And got a chance to talk to Cord, and he spoke to me on Zoom, and he got on the floor. I remember him getting on the floor, and he has a thing about grounding himself, which is very fascinating to me, because you can see, normally he doesn't even have socks. Both he and Jeffrey are bohemians. You know what I'm saying? So they always come in real loose, They're loose. And I really appreciate that, because that's sort of saying that's how it's going to be. That I'm going to be comfortable talking to him and that type of thing. And we had a conversation that I really don't actually remember. I just remember how he made me feel, which makes sense. That he was going to be easy to talk to, and that he was a very interesting character himself. And that was already, very attractive. Obviously, he talked about, cultural conditioning. That's what the film is about. The power of that is what a lot of my life has been about, sort of pushing against that. And reading the script, you saw they had the ruthless efficiency of a person who understood that scenes you need to get in and out quickly. And he does that so well. He's a very good ear. And so it was nice to be invited. He chose, he says he has a good judge of character, he's a good judge of talent. And I think he's a very good judge of chemistry. We weren't going to have a chance to meet each other, really, just on set. And I think in meeting Jeffrey, who has the biggest burden on him to do this gig, and also in his leadership, set the table for everyone else, which he did so well. He didn't mind me coming up to him and going, "Our scene is tomorrow." He's like, "Oh boy." But I felt comfortable doing it, So I think that that's the type of conversation I had with him, one that sort of gave me permission that I could be myself, but also on one of the first scenes that we filmed inside of the house with Sterling, and it was the scene in the pool. I'm seeing Sterling's muscles. There's a lot of energy going on. You know what I'm saying? At least for me, there's all these handsome men there, only me. It's night. What do you want? But I say this joke coming out of the house, and the person who hears it is Cord, and he throws his head back and laughs with his entire body. And I said, "Oh, that's wonderful." And I've been calling him Cap for a long time, because he stands like a captain with his hands behind him. He's got this real beautiful line on him. He's very sort of, very regal, like he's at the prow of a ship, Titanic-like. And I just like that there's this carriage about him, and yet that it's all in fun. And he uses his greatest virtues for storytelling, and yet he has a wonderful sense of himself, and that lends himself to why he could attract someone as powerful as Jeffrey Wright. And Jeffrey Wright is the real deal. I say he's like the tractor beam on the Death Star. He just drew everything in. And, if you weren't drawn in by everything on the plate, they say Jeffrey Wright, and you go, "Oh, I'm in. I'm sorry. What can I do to, make this happen?" So this is a good thing. And I feel like I worked my whole life to have that type of intro into a space like that. The bonus is that look what was created. And so if you've waited a lifetime to be inside of those spaces with this type of energy and these types of people, then you've got to believe that you belong. And I did believe that.
Wow, nice. I love that. Although I did hear that Cord just told Jeffrey 9.5 weeks, and then it just went from there. That was the real selling point for. I don't know how the marketing missed that. If we could show a clip of Erica's wonderful work. It is the sad. Clip 3 is sad. Funny. One, I love the sibling dynamic, which is lovingly vicious. It's just lays you bare and eviscerates you. But what I really love about Erica's performance and her character is that there are plenty of people who would have written the love interest as just the gal who comes through. Like, we don't have to spend any time with her. And instead, she is a grounding force in a monsoon of life that Monk is going through. She really kind of tethers him and tells him truths and gives him a place to kind of land. And I love that she is insightful and interesting and witty. And so for Erica, like, what were the qualities that you saw in her? And I'm sure a lot of them are your own as well.
She was delicate. I intuited that because, again, Cord is very delicate. And so I'm often asked to be a hammer in a scene. But I think if you look at the entire cast, we are all using certain types of power tools to come in and add life force, strength, aggression sometimes, that type of thing, focus. And yet I was given a gift because I think he saw me as a full person and a woman who could allow herself to lay in the cut a bit and be the object of desire. I'm not always asked to do those things. I'm not allowed to. But I think that a Black man sees me in this way. And so I tried to allow myself in the character, not me, because you also have to get past your own thinking, to know what the gig is, what the mission is, what he wants to accomplish. And so these things, and I'm often asked to do comedy that's a little bit more broad, a lot more broad, but I knew that it didn't need that. And so it felt for me a lot of like I was holding back some of the horsepower that I'm asked to use, and yet there's a lot of horsepower in that scene. It's just different. It's just deployed differently. So that's what I did. And again, we get to meet cute. I get to drop some tomatoes, and have him meet me across the street and help me, and then drink wine. And that's very Woody Allen type, Diane Keaton stuff. And so I know I've seen those types of things, but I'm not asked to do it. So one of the first things that happened when I saw Issa Rae, and she was there, she said, "Girl, I love this role for you." And I knew exactly what she meant. And I said, "Me too." So that's what I saw.
I mean, it is an interesting thing that it is a profound moment for a Black woman to get to meet cute in a way that is just human. It's not elevated. You drop tomatoes and somebody helps you pick them up instead of it being up here. And that's, it's sad but true, but it's a wonderful thing to be able to actually see it and be able to say, yeah, that could be me.
Yes.
I drop things all the time.
Actually, people really,
I got a shot.
they really love the lotion scene. I have to bring that up because it's brought up to me all the time.
Really?
Girl, that's the best sex scene we ever saw. I said, really? Girl, when you come in, just putting the lotion on? We know what happened. I said, oh, okay. I wanted more to happen, but it's all right. I mean, that's, but it comes up a lot, and I think people really appreciate it, and it's amazing what people bring out, but that lotion scene really has legs,
I feel like the rating of the film is going up just as we're talking about it. Like, people are like, we didn't think about the lotion scene. We need to go and check this. It's an X. So I want to talk now. I mean, if you're going to have a character named Monk, your music is obviously going to be very important. And, I think jazz becomes inevitable. But I want you to talk about like how you thought about it. And then to me, as I listened to it, I actually felt that there was a lot of like, I know nothing about music, but classical music underneath it, because it felt like Monk was a character who, while he would appreciate jazz as an art form, was certainly somebody who valued a more classic rendition of literature. Like he still embraced those values of what's proper in literature and how. And I thought it was for me, it was an interesting kind of thing of being loose and restrained all at the same time. So I'm very curious about how you approach the music.
I love that. Can I ask you a question?
No.
What felt classical to you? Do you remember?
I just remember listening to some of the music and thinking, like, there's a there's an energy to the jazz kind of that you expect, and it's very loose. And then there was some really kind of light things with the music, was like flutes and just a
Yeah.
little more.
How interesting. Well, that's we've had so many conversations, and that's the first time somebody said this to me. And I'll tell you, I'm going to give you the very specific answer that probably isn't right for this panel, but I'm going to do it anyway. So, if you listen to Bill Evans, every time we go dive deep into jazz, which I never mean to, but then we do, it feels like Debussy a lot. So if you listen to French, it feels like Bill Evans somehow, in his mind, cycled Debussy, who's a French composer of the late 19th, early 20th century. And I think you're referring to the family theme. And I've never thought about the family theme as that. But now that you mention it, there is this kind of fluidity that feels like that kind of Frenchy, Bill Evans-y classicism. And I love that. So I appreciate that. Can I go home now?
Not you. I'm going home.
No, that's good. No, that's great. That's lovely. That's
And I
lovely.
can actually tell you that in my notes I have classicism
Yeah, I like that.
written down.
I like that. I hadn't thought of it that way, but it's look, all the time people ask me, because a lot of people don't know of me as a jazz musician, and I've written a lot of big epic film scores, a lot of classical type stuff, and I studied classical music and jazz absolutely simultaneously. And for me, there was never any differentiation. They were equally weighted in my education and also in my home. It was, there'd be, my mother would play music in her, she was an artist, she would play music in her studio, and, Miles Davis would fall down, and then it would be, fall down on the record player, on the thing. And then it would be, Igor Stravinsky, and then it would be Beethoven Violin Concerto, and then we'd be listening to Bill Evans, and then, we might go to flamenco or something like that. So it was really an eclectic growing up of listening. So that stuff gets into my kind of psyche without me realizing it some of the time. And I think you are the first one who heard that. So there you go. Well done. Just when you say you don't know anything about music, look what happens. Look what happens. But you grab one of the two major themes, which is the family theme, which is that buddy buddy ba ba da 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 ba da da da, which we heard in the funeral scene. And then the monk theme, which is the ba 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 da da, which is the kind of the more edgy, more monk-like composition. And then there are other themes as well, but those are the two kind of major thrusts. Did I answer the question?
I don't know. I'm just thrilled that I did not make a fool of myself.
No, you did great. You did great.
Miles Davis was a big Stravinsky fan, wasn't he?
Yeah, listen, he, there was lots of collaboration. Miles Davis did all this stuff with Gil Evans, classically trained, and these are like those albums, Sketches of Spain, and that stuff that Gil Evans did is all based in classical music. And actually, I got a commission from the chamber orchestra here in town, and I want to make it a tribute to Gil Evans, really lean into that kind of orchestral writing and see what that sounds like for chamber orchestra.
And Charlie Parker was a big Bach guy.
Yeah. Well, and it's, again, this is funny. So we're taking my son to school the other day. Bach comes up on the radio. And have any of you driven a 13-year-old to school?
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's a complicated experience, It's an exercise in patience and silence. So Bach is playing, and my son plays jazz. And I said, I've always thought of Bach as being a lot like jazz. Silence. Then he said, why? And I said, well, listen to it. It's like swapping fours. It was a Brandenburg concerto. And so it was, it would go, it's very famous, but it's like phrase by phrase, just like in jazz. So bebop and Baroque music have a lot to do with one another. And in fact, a lot of, there have been a lot of kind of remakes of classical music and bebop style. But now we really digress.
But thank you, because I think that's an amazing kind of look that you can listen to the music and experience so many different kinds, and it still speaks to one character. Like, I think it's not so definitive to one kind of music representing him, but it is a lot of give and take and flow and musical undertones. So I think it's wonderful. I think it's amazing.
It's a great question.
Yeah, no, it is a great question. And I think, like everybody else, when I'm asked to write a score, there's a lot of me in there. We're always in service of the film and in service of what the film needs at any given time and what the characters need and what kind of support they need. But it's always going to be from a perspective that is uniquely this perspective of the person who's writing it. So that is going to come into play even when I'm not totally aware of it, as you pointed out.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
In Autumn Leaves, the melody
Right.
it can be traced back to Tchaikovsky.
That's right.
Nice.
It's like it's the nature of the thing.
And as long as we're getting into this.
Oh no.
The last thing I'm going to say, it's an hour and a half panel. We can do this. I studied with a guy named Milton Babbitt at Juilliard. Anybody know who Milton Babbitt was? No. Milton Babbitt was a lion of the 20th century. He invented computer music. His music was so hard to listen to that nobody did. And he wrote a famous article that's called "Who Cares If You Listen?" And I would go in there and I would write 12-tone jazz. Don't ask me about that. But his favorite song was Autumn Leaves because it's musically deeply complex, Anyway, so there we go.
I don't know. I feel like I should get out while I'm ahead, but
No, you're good. You're good.
I'm gonna keep forging on.
You got Jeffrey and I going, but I'm going to shut up. Okay.
So I do want to ask you a question, Jeffrey, though, because you are so known to so many people for being kind of this dramatic actor, and obviously Westworld and the Batman and Bond are not lighthearted kind of things. They're very, very dark and deep. But you have so many roles that are really slyly and overtly funny, very strong comedic things. And we're talking like BoJack Horseman and the Venture Brothers. I mean, this is not like the stuff that you think of immediately when you think of him, but I'm really curious about what being able to exercise those comedic muscles does for you. What's enjoyable about it?
Well, I was playing Westworld for laughs. I just didn't get them. This isn't a comedy? Yeah, I mean, I think for me, some of the funniest moments in film are in dramatic pieces. I think, you got to weave comedy throughout. I don't necessarily achieve that at all times, but I also like to play just overt comedic stuff, like Jim Jarmusch's stuff, which I do like a kind of sly humor, I guess, I like Wes Anderson's sense of irony. Angels in America there's a lot of that is comedic. When I first started acting in college, when I was late, like my junior year, I took this class with this guy named Walter Boughton, and he was this kind of patrician, New England professor, big long scruffy beard, and he had understudied Burl Ives in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof on Broadway. That was his moment, and he'd gone on, and he was a nice guy. But from the first day of class, the first time we performed, I think we did some Chekhov, like some Neil Simon retelling of Chekhov short stories, something. I forget what it was. Anyway, I would go for the laugh in everything. I would try to find the humor in everything, And at the end of this, that was junior year. Senior year, I asked him to write a recommendation for me because he'd gone to Yale to go to Yale, I said, I think I want to try this. I want to try to be an actor. He said, well, you might make an Eddie Murphy type, but I don't ever see you being a dramatic actor. I don't serious actor, something like that. Hey, Eddie Murphy's badass, Nothing against Eddie Murphy, but why you got to put limitations on me, bro? There's always been from the beginning. I've always loved to cut it up, but often, haven't found those scripts. What was wonderful about this script, it's really made me appreciate the power of humor even more so, because what we're able to do in terms of inviting people into complicated, tricky, uncomfortable spaces with the humor is really, really useful, wonderful, and has lent our film a type of buoyancy and kind of universality that is really special. So, yeah, I may be looking for more opportunities such as this, but also giving more thought to really the cinematic value, no matter what the circumstance, no matter what the genre, of trying to, go back to, the beginnings for me maybe, and really trying to find those elements that, that sneak in that allow you to sneak in the other stuff, find the humor. Yeah.
Well, I think you cannot discuss comedy and humor in a film and not know that so much of it is the magic of timing and pacing and how it's cut. So we're going to come to you, Hilda, and talk about how you approach, because a lot of this is dialogue and it's interrelational, the way people kind of play off of each other. So can you talk a little bit about how you approached editing this and how your working relationship was with Cord, which I'm going to assume was nice. But like, how did that work?
Well, the relationship with Cord was great. I mean, as other people have said, Cord really approached this with a lot of humility and a really open heart, which I think is really particularly important with editing, because there is, some people refer to the edit as the final rewrite. There is there's different movies that you make. There's the movie you write, there's the movie you shoot, and then there's the movie that you cut. And it finally, comes together. And it's, and what it means is that you have to be open to seeing the best of your work, and then open to not judging yourself too harshly and letting go of what isn't working. And Cord was really ready to take on whatever transformations the movie needed to go through, in really creative ways. I think, Cord, your training as a writer really allowed you to think of story and character as something that is like a journey that the audience needs to go on to discover something, Editing itself is such a crazy task because it's a long process. I'm sure some of you are filmmakers and you know this. So it's kind of a funny thing of, you have an idea in your head of what the movie is, and then the movie eventually needs to hold true to what was good from the very beginning, which was Cord's amazing script, and these sort of core performances that were really great. And then you need to let it tell you how to cut it. So I think, we were both pretty open to that process. You kind of have to listen to the material like not to get too woo, but like kind of like a diviner, with a divining rod. You have to let the material tell you how to cut it and how to find the balance of, humor and drama, which this movie, I mean, that was really the trick of this movie that was so difficult, was we knew the tone we were going for, but nailing it scene by scene, and continuing it as a through line throughout the movie, so that no one mood that we dipped into ever got too kind of broadly comic and farcical, and no drama ever took us so far into a dark range that it was very hard for the audience to come back out of it and go into these more satirical comedic scenes, So it was this sort of like balancing act, kind of a high wire act at times, of maintaining the tone. And sometimes that was a rhythmic thing. Sometimes it was a question of just pulling the string taut enough that we could find that buoyancy, to be able to keep the train moving along and keep the audience with us. And then knowing when we needed to take the moments to slow down, which the movie does do. It has moments when we change the rhythm and needs to make it a little uneven, a little more syncopated. So yeah, Anyway, yeah, it's a long process.
I mean, I love that. I mean, as hard and difficult as it is, and as much time as you spend looking at things again and again and again, but takes real finesse to actually have found that breathing room to let it be funny and sad and all those things all at the same time. I think it was a wonderful job because it really does clip. We're never at a lag. It's never too slow and it's never too fast. So I think I commend you both. I'll add you in there. But yeah, it was really well done. So we are going to be taking questions from the audience. And so I just got the high sign that we can go ahead and do that. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and we're going to call on you. Or I've asked all of the questions. Oh, no. Okay, sir, we'll start with you. Okay. So the question is, for everyone, Cord, and then everyone, how did your previous work, how did your previous experience inform making this project?
I mean, for me, it's sort of in so many ways. I feel like this movie is like the culmination of my life's work, to be honest. And so, but I will say that, so in TV, I was a TV writer for 4 years before I started working on this. And I would say TV informed it. The great thing about TV writing is that the time that you get to spend with characters allows you to get really deep into character, and you get really intimate, and you sort of like really focus on character as sort of as the most interesting part of the show, right? I think that's why a show like The Office, I think, is so beloved by generations, because you really start to feel like you understand. Like, these people start to feel like people's friends, right? Like, you start to feel like you know them the way that you know people at your office or in your friend group. And so when I came to this film, I sort of came at it with a focus on character, because I don't know how to write focused on plot, right? And so I think that a lot of people, when they come to film, it's like, well, I got 90 minutes, I got 2 hours, so I got to sort of like burn through it and make sure that I sort of like get all the plot twists and moves in there, right? And the beginning, middle, and end, and they think about sort of like the act structure and all that. And it's for me, I sort of would never think about that when I'm writing. It's just, to me, it's always character. The only reason people care about plot is because they care about the people going through that plot. And so I wrote it very sort of like from a place of like, make sure that these people feel real and authentic and lived in. And, then you get a wonderful actor like Eric Alexander, you get a wonderful actor like Jeffrey Wright, right? Because they feel like they're able to play real people, and they're not just there to come out and say some expository dialogue and then disappear, right? So that's that. And
I've done that too. I can do
that. You won't do it for the amount we're paying you in this one.
True.
And then journalism, really, the thing that journalism really taught me that I utilize in all of my writing now is that when you're a journalist, you wake up every day and you say, why this story? Every newspaper in the country says, why should we put this story on the front page as opposed to the thousands of other stories that we could put on the front page? Why this now? And so everything that I sit down to write, I'm like, why should I be telling this in the year 2024? Why should this exist right now? And I think that sort of, that to me, I think helps the relevance and the timeliness of everything that I work on. It's sort of like this, it's just me constantly focused on like, what is this? Why should this exist in the world right now? And I think that sort of helps the projects that I work on break through a little bit, because it feels like, oh yeah, this is, this movie felt like it's worth telling in the year 2023, 2024. Like, it feels like this is a conversation that I want to have right now. And so I think that's something that journalism taught me, is sort of like think about like why you are doing this right now, as opposed to the millions of others, all of the other stories in the world that you could be telling at this moment.
I mean, it feels like, it's been repeated again and again that so much of everybody is bringing themselves into every part of, their career. And so you kind of have a gravitational pull of all of your own things that go with you as you go into projects. And so I think it has to inform. Do we have any other questions? Anybody want to? Okay, well, you're right in front of me, so go ahead. Okay, so at its core, the question is, are there things that you wish you had known knowing your experience and your background, are there things that you still wish you had known beforehand?
Yeah, I mean everything. The hard part about this film was like the day we were done shooting it, I was like, okay, can we shoot the real movie now? Was this just like a practice round? And it was like, no, this was the real movie. And so it's like, okay, well, I wish that I could go back to day one because, you know, I came in not knowing much and I left knowing everything, right, that I needed to know.
Careful.
I don't mean everything, but I meant like, you know, I meant like what a best boy is, like right, like they like that, I got like that. That is something that I didn't know, and I was like, oh, that's a best boy. Okay, I get it. And so that's what I mean more. That sort of like I just understand what's going on around me. I don't know everything there is to know about directing. That's yeah. But I would say that a piece of advice that I really took to heart and that I will give you that a friend gave me, and I said, what's one thing that I should know? And he had just finished shooting his first feature film, and he said every day you go to set, how you behave and your manner is going to be how everybody behaves. Everybody. And so he said, if you go to set and you're rude and you yell and you throw things, everybody is going to do that. And it's going to be a miserable experience for everybody that's there. And so he said, as much as you can, make sure that you go in every day with a good attitude and sort of like that you're happy to be there and that you are sort of enjoying yourself. And that will permeate the entire set. And so the thing that I had a practice that I did is whenever I was miserable and tired and hungry, and it was like 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, and it was raining, and things were going wrong as they inevitably do on a film set. Sort of, I would have this practice where I would look around at all of these people, and I would look around at everybody, all the other dozens of people that make a film set work, and the people who are carrying heavy shit, and the people who are sort of like setting up catering, and the people who are like sort of like standing in the cold with a boom mic, and the people who are sort of hustling around. I would remember that all of these people were missing time with their families, missing time with their friends, missing concerts that they wanted to go to, missing movies that they wanted to go to, missing birthday parties that they wanted to go to. Missing out on their lives in order to help me make this and execute this vision. And every time that I thought about that, every bad feeling I had just melted away. And I would feel nothing but gratitude and love and joy at being there. And sort of like nothing but a sort of like love for everybody that was helping me do this. And it all went away. And I sort of like never yelled, never got upset. It was just like, we are in this together, and I love all of these people, and they're doing this because they love this too. And so that to me is sort of the number one. It's if we had made this movie and everything were the same, and I were here right now, but all these people had been miserable, I don't think I would have wanted to do it. I don't think it would have been worth it to me. You know, I sort of, it is not worth it to me to walk on people so that I can succeed. It's sort of like I want everybody to feel like we can succeed together and sort of like do this together. That's the beauty of filmmaking, is that you're collaborating and sort of like you want to work with other people who you love and respect and admire. And so that was, you know, if I impart anything to you, it's that. It's sort of, and when you make that kind of environment, people will go the extra mile, you know, because this wasn't a job that people were there for the paycheck. You know, a lot of people could have made, I guarantee that most of these people to my left could have made more money doing something else. But this was a set that Christina told me was the first time she'd ever seen, like the Grip and Electric team, like they went out to buy the novel to read the novel she was like, I'd never seen people do that before, but people were just like so passionate about it and excited about it. And so I think that if you make that kind of environment, people will respond to that.
Oh, that's lovely.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
No.
We're all staring at you
No,
now, so now you have to do it.
I was. It's it really made a huge difference, and that every person felt it on set and did bring their best work because of it, and that was all. It was amazing to work for a leader like that. So I think what you said is really makes a difference on a set and makes better work and makes a better environment and makes a better picture.
Fantastic. I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. I'm going to go with the man straight in the back. Yeah, who's got his thumb pointing to his head. The question is, what were some of the biggest challenges that they had to overcome during production? Somebody further down the line?
Yeah. Somebody who's not Cord.
Biggest challenges? I mean,
Well, I know everybody's feeling kumbaya job here, but I'm still trying to get over the fact that I didn't get my 9.5 weeks. So I got it together, and I'm definitely fell into the flow. It's real.
Can I say I knew it was coming back around?
Yes.
I knew.
No, I didn't have any issues like that. I came in and I really was very excited to be there, frankly, and it fit every expectation I had. He's absolutely right. He had such a really great energy around him, and I think that energy attracts energy, and that's what happened. And I'm glad that I got to experience like that, because I was found in independent film when I was 14, and I was on a set very young, and it made me think about what the gentleman asked about the types of things, that we think about on other sets or whatever, that or what we've learned. And what I've learned is I didn't know anything. I had no idea. And I usually don't know. And I don't act like I know anymore, so I don't, it doesn't scare me. I can go into a set and say, I'm not quite sure what it is I'm supposed to do, but he believes I can do it. So if I get there, I'm just gonna be led by something that's more instinctual, and I've lived by that, and I'm glad I do, because it leads me to interesting spaces. But I'm usually making up. I don't come in with any sort of prescribed thing, and I'm glad I don't still.
I think there were 2 challenges, I think, that were primary. One of them is specific to this, and another, I think, is relates to most independent film. The first challenge that I had personally was that we were shooting in Boston. I had spent time in Boston. I was not looking forward to going back to Boston. I'd had uninteresting meetings with various of the local law enforcement in Boston. But that said, going back to Kumbaya, working on this film actually made me kind of love Boston, which is a personal miracle. But I think the primary challenge was a very simple one, was time.
Money.
Which was born of the challenges with resources. We shot in 25 days with an additional day after a couple of cuts of the film.
26.
Right? But the 26th day was in post, really. So, and it was like 12-hour days, which is like, oh wow, 12 hours, cool. But it means you've got to drive the train every day. That was probably the primary challenge, is trying to stuff stuff. We made all our days pretty much.
Yeah, we made all of our days, and I think that the thing that to keep in mind though is that, and it's the reason why I really love, and it's look, obviously it's great to have more money. It gives you more time. It gives you more toys to play with. That's great, but necessity is the mother of invention, and all filmmaking is creative problem solving every day. That's it, and having less money. I'll give you a perfect example, right? There is a scene, I don't know if you've seen the movie, I hope everybody's seen the movie in here, right? The scene in which Lisa dies, the sister dies, and you just see her feet on the bed, right? You're sort of like shooting through that small window, you just see the feet on her bed. So many people have come up to me and been like, that it was so moving, it was so powerful just seeing her feet stop moving, and sort of like, you don't need more than that. And the reason that we have that is because we couldn't afford extras who knew what they were doing when it came to a heart attack. That's truly what it was. there was a huge window that Christina wanted to shoot through, and she was like, no, it's great. We'll have more perspective here, and we'll see everything, and it'll be great.
Reflections.
Yeah, the reflection. She was like so excited about that, and then we like put background actors in there, and like we had an EMT like try to teach them what to do in event of a heart attack, and it was fucking crazy. Like it was like they were like running around. It's like not their fault. They're not doctors and nurses, but they were just like clear, like just like running around. And I'm like, that's why she fucking died, because there's like bozos in the, like this is like clown college hospital. And so I was like, there's no way we can put this on screen. It will look crazy. And so I was like, what is a creative solution to this problem? Like, how do we do this with the resources provided, right? And it was like, you know what? Let's shoot through here. All we need to see is her feet, and we just need to see the chest compression stop and her feet stop moving, and that's it. And we don't need more than that. And it'll actually be more powerful because we don't need to hear like the flat line, the doo, and you don't need like all of this tropey stuff that we would have done otherwise. We didn't do because we didn't have the time or the money. And so it's like, yes, you want more stuff like that, but also it's like sometimes things are better because you don't just throw money at the problem. You know, I think that a lot of movies get pretty indulgent because they're just like, throw money at it. Who cares? Throw money at it. Throw money at it. And it's like, what if you don't throw money at it? What if you just sort of like think through this and sort of like and figure it out with the people that you're like your collaborators that you're there with? And I think that ultimately the scene was better for it, you know?
Okay, we have time for one more. It has to be a good one. Who has a great question? Out of all of these amazing scenes that you put together, how did you two work out the blocking, and who had the better? Did anybody have a better perspective of blocking, or how did you go about figuring out that in the setup of scenes?
Well, we sat down and we shot listed for weeks before being in Boston, and then 8 weeks in Boston, we would go location scouting and sort of see, does the scene we have in our mind fit into this location? And so we went in with a very solid plan with all of our rules about how we were going to shoot Monk and how we were going to introduce people. And then I think it's very important to step back and see what the brilliant actors want to do. And there were times when I wanted to change it and it wasn't right. And there were times when, you know, we had to fit it into a certain space. But I think Cord had a lot of ideas and I had a lot of ideas, and we definitely melded them together, and then everything goes out the window when then the person playing the part comes to set, and you have to be open to what they're gonna do and then find a way to make it work.
Yeah, and I think that the way that for me it's just all, and the way that sort of like I was comfortable doing that is just preparing so much. It's like sort of like Picasso, right? If you look at like Picasso's old paintings, they're all like photorealistic, right? And so like he had to have sort of like a real basis of like, I can do all this to just like start screwing around and become the Picasso that like everybody knows, right? And so I think that just making sure you have a solid foundation, which means like we made sure the script was airtight. Script was airtight, right? Like it was like, and it doesn't mean like everybody loves it, but it means like it makes sense. You know, it's sort of like there's nothing that doesn't make sense in it. You may not like it, but it's sort of like it tells the story that we want to tell. And so that is a solid foundation. And then we had a shot list, which was a solid foundation. We sort of like knew what we wanted to get each day in each scene. And so from that allowed us then to sort of call audibles once the actors got there, right? Because then it's like, well, here's what we envision. What do you, and then rehearsals was like, we'd run through it twice and then we'd start shooting. We didn't really have rehearsals, right? But we'd sort of like follow their lead and let them sort of like get in and feel out the space and sort of like see how they wanted to do it. And sort of then sometimes we'd follow their lead and say like, actually that's better. Or sometimes we'd say like, no, here's where we envision you. And then sometimes you'd have to call an audible because we were shooting on locations and like all of a sudden it would be raining. And so, you know, all of a sudden we have to move out of the kitchen because the rain's too loud on the roof in the kitchen, you know? And so we have to sort of like rethink everything that we were going to do. But all of that comfort for me comes from just knowing everything that we want to do from day one, and then sort of once we know that, then you can scrap it, right? And so I would say that, all of the good ideas were probably Christina's. All of the crappier ideas were probably mine. But I think that is like, it is, you just have to me, in my mind, I know there's some directors who are like, no, you have to stand here and say it like this. And like, maybe one day I'll feel like I'm making a movie where I want to do that. But this one, I felt like the film needed a looseness, it needed sort of improvisation, and it needed sort of like us to think on our feet. Like that is how, it's like jazz in that way. I think that sort of like we, did take some sort of lessons from jazz in the making of this movie.
Can I
But
just ask, just real quick, about how you did the one with Keith David? Because that's really an amazing thing, and I that sticks out to me is how difficult it was to get them in the scene.
Go ahead.
Well, we had a lot of plans for certain coverage, of course, and then one of our lead actors, Oak, came to set with a scratched cornea, so he had to wear the eye patch out of necessity. It wasn't.
Yeah, that was not
part
my
of
idea.
the picture, and
Unfortunately, not my idea.
Yeah, but his eye looked whack, man. Just naked. I was like, go with that naked whack eye, man. That thing was grisly. It really was. I was like, oh, you're going to cover that up? Oh, man, no.
But I learned the worst thing you can do for a scratched cornea is point a light at it. So we wanted to get the scene in as little time as possible, and not torture him, honestly.
Yes.
And we always had the plan to start on Monk and then pull back and reveal that we were in the room, and then our brilliant Steadicam operator, Xavier Thompson, after seeing the scene once and doing the coverage that we had planned in one Steadicam move instead of breaking it up, we pivot and we say, okay, we got this piece in that take, so now we're going to turn around and get this piece, and we just ran the scene as a oneer several times. So everyone really was in a flow. We didn't break it up at all. I think that's what made it feel so magical.
I love it.
Mm-hmm. But it was also Cord's vision that they'd be born of his desk.
Yeah.
That was the stage.
Yeah.
His interior stage was it was the office. So it was all as described. But I think to your question, there are a couple of ways to go about it. You can, and it all depends on the frame, right? So what the actor does is work within the frame. So Cord and Christina would come up, and you have an idea of what your vision is, your cinematic vision is for any individual scene, right? But if it's a close-up, then the leeway for the actor is within that close-up, and you play within that. If it's a wider shot where you have more room to use as a tool, then the actor is going to use that space to the extent that he can to tell the story. That's the idea, right? So that's when you come up and you set up a shot, and you say, well, I don't think that it's a better way for me to tell the story within that frame. I don't mind if a director comes that has very specific frames. You want that because that's the framework for the vision. What Cord did wonderfully was allow for collaboration within the individual frame, right? I mean, if there's a close-up, I'm not going to insist that it's a wide shot. But if it's a wide, I want to use the room, use the space in the way that I think best conveys my side of the story, right? And ideally, we find common ground. We're synthesized. Sometimes you're not, sometimes you know. But ideally, that's where the collaboration lives, That's part of it anyway. But, overall, in terms of day-to-day, you had a very specific cinematic vision that tied to the narrative vision, and you were open to allowing us to help, play inside of it and build it. For example, the Ortiz was a lovely moment. Yeah. The way that it was initially framed, it's essentially as you had it framed, but John was behind the desk. Yeah. And he asked if he could come in front of the desk. I don't know if you know this scene.
This is the Johnny Walker scene
Yeah,
when
the
he's
Johnny
coming. He's sort of
Walker
talking
scene.
about the Johnny Walker.
Yeah, so that he could be a little more demonstrative, but at the same time a little more intimate with me, a little more persuasive. But that worked within. There's nothing really needed to change. It's just a slightly different use of the space that felt better for him. More organic and more potent for him as an actor, allowed him, to free up whatever he needed to free up in order to tell the story. But again, it was all within the context of what had been provided by Cord.
And I want to say something too. This almost nothing, but it meant something to me, and Cord totally went with it. But when we were with Meyer Lucretia, and you had me in the passenger seat, and I said, but I wouldn't do that because she's an elder. I should sit in the middle. And he said, I'm all right with that. And so many people have said, we love how that's set up. For one thing, it's giving her pride of place to tell this story, to announce her engagement. But then also, it's just one of those things that just is how I grew up, that I wouldn't allow her to be in the middle seat. I get to relax back there, and people say, we see your knee up. We love how you just sat there. Now me, I'm just chilling. I don't even know. But, people just grasp onto these things. And I said it was really about Cord sort of understanding that those things kind of matter, the hierarchy, and that it doesn't have anything to do with her housekeeping,
Right.
that she would be in front. And then suddenly there's a dynamic there that's a family dynamic that she gets to play with Jeffrey. And I get to play sort of the outsider but insider thing. And I thought that was beautiful.
And
Lean
it's a little bit of
forward,
a
which I love. Like she leans forward in that. When she says that she's getting married, you move forward, and it's this. Because I scored that moment. That's an incredible. But you do this. You look. I look at everything they do, right? And that for me was like a key moment to grab onto, because you then come and engage in this situation.
But it's a lovely cultural touchstone. You recognize how you treat elders in your community, and when it doesn't show up, or it's different, you notice it. Even if you don't pinpoint it, you go, But when you do see it, you go, oh, yeah, they were raised right. That's ultimately what we think is, oh, they were raised right. So I know you guys really want to keep going.
Can I just say one more thing?
Sure.
There's sometimes you wanna direct, right? You're interested in directing, yeah? There's some times where very rare, where you want to show up on set and let actors do what they want to do, and you try to photograph them. You don't want to do that too often, unless you have you think a set should resemble an asylum, right? You don't want to do that. You want to give parameters, provide parameters. But there are sometimes, depending on the scene, maybe where you allow that chaos to happen and let the actors figure how they want to do it, and you find it. But more often than not, you have to, you just know the frame that you want to shoot through. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm so sorry, but we've got to go. So if you all will please join me in thanking this amazing panel.
Thank you.